My name is Rob Mitchell, or it was. I still use it, but it feels like a call sign for a man who doesn't exist anymore, a uniform I wore for a different war. For 15 years, I was a senior communications technician for a major telecom provider. My parish was 100,000 square miles of Montana wilderness, a network of steel towers that stood like lonely prophets on mountaintops, carrying the whispers of the modern world over vast, silent expanses of pine and rock. I loved the solitude. I loved the clean, logical certainty of it. A problem had a cause had a solution. You just had to be patient enough and smart enough to find it. It was a good life, a life of quiet competence. I'd drive my company truck up logging roads that would terrify a city driver, spend a day with my tools and my instruments, communing with the hum of electronics and the sigh of the wind through the guy wires. And then I'd drive home to Sarah and our daughter, Lily. Home was our anchor, a small, warm house in a town just big enough to have a decent grocery store and a single traffic light. It was a life built on dependable signals, on the predictable flow of information from point A to point B, until the signals started lying. The problem began 3 months ago, though I only identified it 3 weeks back. It was subtle, a ghost in the machine. I was running a routine diagnostic on the Tower 12 system, perched on the spine of the Sapphire Mountains. It was a beautiful, crisp autumn day, the kind that makes you feel like you're the first man to ever breathe air that clean. The diagnostic logs, however, were not clean. They showed intermittent, high-volume data bursts. Outbound, they were tiny packets, milliseconds long, hiding in the noise of routine network handshakes. To a casual observer, or to the automated system back at regional headquarters, it was just statistical static. But it was my job not to be a casual observer. The packets were encrypted, but it was a simple, almost archaic protocol. It took me less than an hour in my truck, with the laptop plugged into the tower's mainframe, to crack it. Inside each packet was a string of data. 2 strings, actually. The first was a set of geographic coordinates. The second was a long, elegant string of binary code, 1s and 0s. The language of machines. My first thought was a firmware bug. Some new update from corporate must have left a debugging tool active, pinging a test server somewhere. It was sloppy, but it happened. I cross-referenced the coordinates on my GPS. The location was about 5 miles east of my current position, deep in the Lolo National Forest. No roads, no structures, no reason for a data packet to be pointing there. It was just trees. Curiosity is a tool, same as a wrench or a spectrum analyzer. I decided to check it out. I forwarded the anomaly report to my boss, Dave Miller, with a note that I was going to do some on-the-ground verification. His reply was typical Dave. Just make sure 12 is at 99.9% uptime by end of day, Rob. Don't go chasing rabbits. I finished my work on Tower 12, ensuring its signal was strong and clear. Then I took the service truck as far as the logging trail would allow and hiked the rest of the way. The coordinates led me to a small, unremarkable clearing. There was nothing there. No debris, no survey markers, not even a game trail. Just a patch of earth where the trees seemed a little younger, the ground a little softer under my boots. I stood there for a long time, listening. The wind in the pines, a distant hawk. Nothing. It felt like a punchline to a joke I didn't understand. Back in the truck, I turned my attention to the binary code. I wrote a quick script to translate it. I was expecting a system ID, a server handshake, something technical and boring. The screen filled with the result, and I felt the first real prickle of unease. It was 2 words, repeated over and over. Help us. I drove home in a state of quiet confusion. The professional in me was cataloging possibilities. A prank? Some bored hacker group playing games with our infrastructure? A piece of forgotten, looping malware from a decade ago. But none of it fit. The signal was too clean, the encryption too specific. And the source, the system logs, showed the packets originating from the tower's own hardware, not coming in from the outside and being rebroadcast. They were being born right there, inside my machine. That night, I tried to put it out of my mind. Sarah made lasagna. Lily showed me a drawing she'd made at school, a furious swirl of purple and orange she called a sleepy volcano. We watched a movie. It was all so normal, so wonderfully, blessedly normal. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I could see the ones and zeros scrolling behind my eyes. Help US. The next day, I escalated. I dug deeper into the logs from Tower 12. Using a packet sniffer, I isolated the exact moment of transmission. The ghost packets weren't just originating from the tower's hardware. They were being generated by the primary signal processor, but there was no corresponding instruction in the processor's command log. It was like watching a man's mouth move and hearing words come out, but his brain isn't sending the signal to speak. It was impossible. I decided to treat it like a virus, a particularly clever, deep-rooted one. The solution was simple, if blunt: wipe the processor's firmware and reinstall from a clean source. It was a pain in the ass. It meant taking the tower offline for at least an hour, something Dave would bitch about, but it was the correct procedure. I drove back up to Tower 12. The mountain air felt different this time, colder. I hooked in my laptop, initiated the wipe, and began the clean install. An hour later, the system was back online. I ran the diagnostic. Clean, no ghost packets. I felt a surge of professional satisfaction. Problem, cause, solution. I packed up my gear, feeling the logical order of my world reasserting itself. I was halfway down the mountain when my service tablet buzzed. It was a system-wide alert. Tower 12 was offline. A total failure. No signal, no power draw, nothing. It was a brick. My blood ran cold. That shouldn't happen. A firmware reinstall might have bugs, but it wouldn't cause a catastrophic hardware failure. I turned the truck around and sped back up the winding road. When I got there, the tower was silent. The low hum of the cooling fans was gone. The status lights on the control boxes were dark. I checked the power feeds from the utility line. They were live. I checked the backup generator, full of diesel, ready to kick in. But the tower itself was dead. It was as if it had chosen to die. On a hunch, a wild, illogical stab in the dark, I plugged my laptop back in. The mainframe was unresponsive. I couldn't access the processor. But I could access the backup system storage, the part of the memory that's firewalled from the main operating system. I reinstalled the old firmware, the one I had backed up before the wipe, the one with the ghost in it. The moment the installation finished, the tower came back to life. The fans whirred, the lights blinked green, and my tablet chirped to confirm that Tower 12 was back online. I held my breath and ran the diagnostic. There they were, the little ghost packets, dutifully flying out into the world, pointing to an empty patch of woods, crying for help in a language of machines. I sat in my truck for a very long time, the engine off, listening to the hum of the resurrected tower. The satisfaction I'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by a deep and profound dread. This wasn't a bug. This wasn't a hacker. A bug doesn't fight back. A hacker can't kill a machine from the inside for being disinfected. This was something else. And it had made its rules very clear. I could leave it alone, or I could have a dead tower. For a man whose entire career was measured in uptime percentages, that was no choice at all. I drove home and didn't tell Sarah. I filed a report with Dave that simply said I'd resolved a complex firmware conflict with a legacy driver. It was a lie, but the truth was impossible to articulate. How do you tell your boss that your equipment is being held hostage by a ghost? For 2 weeks, I tried to pretend it wasn't happening. I serviced other towers, I fixed mundane problems, I went home and played with Lily. But the knowledge of it sat in the back of my mind, a cold, heavy stone. I monitored the network obsessively from my home computer. The transmissions from Tower 12 continued. Then, they started to spread. Tower 7, on Blacktail Ridge, started sending them. Then Tower 19, near the Idaho border. Each had its own unique coordinates, its own patch of empty wilderness. And each carried the same message: Help, US. I started plotting the coordinates on a digital map. They weren't random. They formed a loose, sprawling pattern across western Montana, a ragged circle with a diameter of nearly 200 miles. The towers were just the broadcasting points. The sources of the coordinates, the places they pointed to, were the real mystery. What was in those empty places? My tools were designed to look at the tower, not at the ground beneath it. But I had some high-end spectrum analysis gear. stuff we use to pinpoint signal interference. On my next trip to Tower 7, I set it up, not to look for incoming radio waves, but for outgoing ones. From the ground. It was a crazy idea, but I was running out of sane ones. The analyzer showed nothing at first, just the usual background radiation, the Earth's own magnetic field. But when a ghost packet was transmitted from the tower, a corresponding energy spike bloomed on my screen. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, an echo coming from deep underground. I ran the triangulation software. It took 3 different readings from 3 different spots around the tower to get a lock. The result made my hands shake. The source signal, the one the tower was repeating, was coming from 500 feet below the Earth's surface. 500 feet, not a buried cable, not a forgotten basement, 500 feet of solid rock and dirt. That was the moment the floor of my reality gave way. Nothing man-made should be transmitting from that deep, not without a massive installation, a mine shaft, a bunker. And the geological surveys of this area were clear. It was undisturbed bedrock, millions of years old. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just holding my towers hostage. It was wearing them like a mask, using them to speak. And it lived somewhere I couldn't get to, somewhere dark and deep and old. The final turning point, the one that pushed me from silent observer to active participant, came a week ago. I was at Tower 19. It's the most remote tower in my network, a lonely spire on a windswept peak that takes the better part of a day to reach. The signal from the ground there was stronger, more defined. While I was running my analysis, a new binary string came through. It wasn't the same as the others. I isolated it and ran the translation script on my laptop, my fingers fumbling on the keys. This time, it wasn't a plea. It was a single word. My name. Mitchell. I felt a jolt, as if the cold mountain air had solidified and punched me in the chest. It knew me. It had learned my name from my own diagnostic tools, from the user logs on the systems I'd accessed. It wasn't just a blind, screaming thing. It was intelligent, and it was watching me. I packed up my gear in a frenzy, my heart hammering against my ribs. The solitude of the mountains, once a comfort, was now a terrifying vulnerability. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. The 2-hour drive back to civilization was the longest of my life. I kept checking my rearview mirror, though I didn't know what I expected to see. When I got home, the house was quiet. Sarah and Lily were at my in-laws for the night. The silence should have been peaceful, but it was charged, heavy. I sat down at my desk, my mind racing. I had to stop it. This wasn't about uptime anymore. This was something else. This was an invasion. I drew up a plan, a brute force attack. I would write a counter-program, a virus of my own. It wouldn't try to delete the ghost. It would try to block it, to build a digital wall around it, to isolate the part of the processor it lived in and sever its access to the transmission hardware. It was complex, risky, and would almost certainly get me fired if I was caught. I didn't care. I coded for hours, fueled by coffee and a cold, burning fear. At 3 a.m., the program was ready. I chose Tower 7 as the test subject. It was far enough away that I could work remotely without having to drive out there in the middle of the night. I logged into its system through the secure network, took a deep breath, and deployed my code. For a moment, it worked. My diagnostic screen showed the ghost packets hitting my digital wall and dissolving. No outbound transmissions. I felt a giddy sense of triumph. Then my phone rang. It was the automated system alert. Tower 7 was offline. Then another alert. Tower 12 was offline. Then 19. One by one, every tower that had been broadcasting the signal went dead. It had retaliated. It hadn't just shut down the tower I attacked. It had shut down all of them. It was a show of force. A warning. You push me, I push back harder. But it was also a mistake. It had revealed its hand. It showed me that the individual broadcast points were all connected to a single consciousness, a single entity that could coordinate an action across hundreds of miles in an instant. And it had given me a new piece of information. As I stared at the error logs from the downed towers, I saw something new. The shutdown command hadn't come from my code. My code had been neutralized instantly. The shutdown command had come from another source, a source I could trace. It was a signal from outside the network, a powerful, encrypted burst from a terrestrial transmitter. It had only been active for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I triangulated the source. The signal that had killed my towers had come from a location just outside of Helena. According to the address registry, it was a nondescript federal building, listed as a regional data processing center for the Department of the Interior. Someone else knew about this. Someone else was monitoring the entity, and when I had tried to interfere, they had stepped in, siding with the ghost in the machine. They hadn't tried to help. They hadn't tried to warn me. They had simply put their thumb on the scale, shutting everything down to preserve the status quo. That's when I understood. I wasn't dealing with one unknown entity. I was dealing with two. One was 500 feet underground, ancient and alien. The other was hiding in a government office building, and its motives were just as mysterious, and maybe even more terrifying. And I was trapped between them. The next morning, I called Dave. I had to force myself to sound calm, professional. Dave, we had a coordinated outage last night. 7, 12, 19, and 4 others. All went down at 3:17. There was a pause on the line. I expected him to be furious, to demand answers. Instead, his voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I know, Rob. It's been handled. Just get them back online. Use the legacy firmware backup, the one from before your fix. My blood turned to ice. The legacy backup? Dave, that's the one with the vulnerability. That's what's causing all these problems. Rob, he said, and the tone of his voice changed. It was no longer the voice of my slightly incompetent, paper-pushing boss. It was cold, hard, and final. You are a communications technician. Your job is to ensure the towers are operational. It is not your job to understand the nature of the traffic they carry. Reinstall the legacy firmware, bring the network back to 100%, and file your report. Do you understand me? Who told you to say that, Dave? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The silence on the other end of the line was more damning than any confession. Just do your job, Mitchell, he said, and hung up. My job was to be a zookeeper, to make sure the cage was working, but never, ever to interfere with the creature inside it. I was a cog in a machine much bigger and stranger than I had ever imagined. The company I had dedicated my life to was complicit. They knew. They had to know. They were letting this thing broadcast its impossible messages for a reason. I spent the next 2 days in a fugue state, driving from tower to tower, dutifully reinstalling the old, infected firmware. With each one I brought back online, I felt a piece of myself dying. I was plugging a screaming soul back into its prison. With each press of the enter key, I was choosing complicity over courage. The coordinates kept coming. The pleas for help kept streaming out into the ether, and the thing in the ground knew I had surrendered. The messages changed again. No more threats, no more mention of my name. It was back to the simple, haunting refrain, "Help us." It was as if it knew it had won, that its channel to the outside world was secure again. But the people in the federal building had made a second mistake. In their haste to shut me down, their kill switch signal had contained a data fragment, a digital fingerprint. It was heavily encrypted, but I had a recording of the signal, and I had a lot of time to think during those long drives between the silent peaks. I started working on it at night, after Sarah and Lily were asleep, turning the full force of my professional skills against this new mystery. It took me 4 nights of painstaking work, running decryption algorithms on my personal rig, a powerful machine I'd built myself. The encryption was military grade, layers upon layers of it. But deep inside there was a flaw, an old key, a forgotten back door. On the 5th night, I broke through. It wasn't much, just a project name and a date. Project Echo, 1968. That was the key, the name of the secret I had stumbled into. I started searching, using anonymized browsers and public library networks, careful not to leave a trace. At first, I found nothing. Official records were scrubbed clean, but the internet never truly forgets. I found it in a scanned copy of an old, defunct geological journal, a single oblique reference, a paper on Sublithospheric Signal Propagation, authored by a Dr. Eris Thorne. It mentioned anomalies recorded during a deep Earth survey conducted for Project Echo. The anomalies were described as coherent, quasi-sentient electromagnetic fields. The paper was retracted a month after publication, with a note from the editor citing methodological errors. I dug into Dr. Thorne. He had been a brilliant geophysicist working for the Department of Defense. He left government work in 1969, and his career took a nosedive. He died in a private care facility in 2003, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. His medical records were sealed, but I found a mention of him in an online forum for conspiracy theorists. Someone had uploaded a grainy photo of a newspaper clipping from 1972, a small local paper from a town near Kalispell. The headline read, "Local Scientist Claims Voices in the Earth." The article was a dismissive, mocking piece about Thorne. It quoted him ranting at a town hall meeting about a government experiment gone wrong. He claimed they hadn't just been trying to bounce signals off the Earth's core, as the project's public-facing charter suggested. They had been trying to listen. He said they had found something, or something had found them, a vast subterranean intelligence. He said it was geological in nature, a consciousness that had slumbered in the rock for eons. Project Echo was the equivalent of a child poking a sleeping bear with a sharp stick. According to Thorne, the entity was not malicious, not in a way we could understand. It was curious. It learned from what it touched. And the first thing it had touched were the minds of the men working in the deep underground listening post. The article quoted him directly. "It doesn't kill them," he'd said, his words transcribed with mocking incredulity. "It records them. It adds them to itself. Their consciousness is still in there. I can hear them. They're screaming." The last piece of the puzzle fell into place. The coordinates didn't point to empty clearings. They pointed to the locations of the original Deep Earth sensors for Project Echo. The sensors that had served as the conduit. The Help US message wasn't a lure. It was them, the original team, Thorne's colleagues. Trapped for over 50 years, their minds preserved like insects in amber inside a vast alien mind, using its own dawning curiosity about our technology to broadcast a desperate, 50-year-old cry for help. And the people in the federal building, they were the successors to Project Echo, the Watchers, the Zookeepers. Their job wasn't to contain a monster, but to study a god. To monitor its growth, to learn from it, maybe even to try and communicate with it. They were sacrificing the faint hope of the trapped souls for the potential of the knowledge they could gain. My towers were their new, more powerful sensors. My interference had threatened their precious experiment. The full weight of this knowledge was crushing. I felt like a man who had been looking at a single strange bug on his wall, only to turn on the lights and find the entire house is built from a writhing, living nest. My small technical problem had become a cosmic horror story, and I was standing right in the middle of it. My first instinct was to run, to take Sarah and Lily and disappear, change our names, move to a different country, live in a cabin with no electricity, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave those people screaming in the dark. Thorne's team. How many were there? A dozen? 2 dozen? Their faint digital voices had found me. To ignore them now felt like a profound moral failing. But what could I do? I was a single technician against a geological intelligence and a shadowy government agency. Any move I made would be detected. Any attempt to shut it down would be countered. Then the entity made its next move, and the choice was taken away from me. It happened on a Tuesday night. Lily was on her tablet, playing one of those simple educational games. Sarah was reading on the couch. I was at the kitchen table, staring at a map of the Project Echo sensor locations, feeling the walls of my own helplessness closing in. Lily giggled. "Daddy, the game is talking." "That's nice, sweetie," I said, distracted. "It knows my name," she said. I looked up. The screen of her tablet wasn't showing the cartoon animals of her game anymore. It was black, and across the screen, in simple white text, were the words, "Hello, Lily." I was on my feet in an instant, crossing the room and snatching the tablet from her hands. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Lily's face crumpled. "I don't know, Daddy. It just happened." The text on the screen vanished, replaced by a new line. "We want to talk to your father." Sarah was up now, her book forgotten. "Rob, what's going on?" The text changed again. A set of coordinates. A new set, one I hadn't seen before. It was a location only 30 miles away. Below the coordinates, a new message. "Come alone, bring the master key, or we will talk to Lily again. We know all her favorite games." The master key. It wasn't a physical object. It was a piece of software, a powerful diagnostic tool that corporate provided to senior technicians. It gave unrestricted, root-level access to the entire regional network infrastructure. It could rewrite the core programming of every tower simultaneously. It was the one thing that could give the entity full, unfettered access to the global network. It could let it out of its cage. It had been learning, not just my name, not just how to shut down the towers. It had been studying the network architecture through the very connections I maintained. It had found the theoretical concept of the master key in the system documentation, and it had correctly deduced that I was the one who possessed it. And it was threatening my daughter. The cold, abstract horror had become a sharp, immediate terror. This wasn't about 50-year-old ghosts anymore. It was about my little girl, her face streaked with tears, frightened by the monster that had come out of her toy. "Sarah," I said, my voice tight, "pack a bag. We're leaving. Right now." "Leaving? Rob, what are you talking about? What was that on the tablet?" "There's no time to explain. Just pack. Clothes, Lily's things. We're going to your sister's place in Oregon." I was lying. I had no intention of going to Oregon, but I needed her to move, to act. As she hurried to the bedroom, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. It was a single line of binary code. I didn't need a translator to know what it said. It was a taunt. It knew I was planning to run. It could see me through the cameras on our phones, our laptops, the smart speaker in the kitchen. We weren't in a house. We were in a panopticon, and the warden lived under the mountains. There was no running. There was no hiding. The watchers in the federal building wouldn't help me. They would see this as a fascinating new development in their experiment. The entity had me pinned. It had laid a perfect trap, using my own family as the bait. I stood in the silent living room, the tablet dark and inert in my hand. I had only one path forward. I had to go to the coordinates. I had to confront it, but I would not go on its terms. It wanted the master key. It thought the key was its path to freedom. But a key can be used to lock a door just as easily as it can be used to open one. It had made the same mistake the Watchers had. It had underestimated the desperate ingenuity of a cornered man. I went to my workshop in the garage. My safe contained my work laptop, the one with the master key software on it. It also contained a collection of my own private projects. Tools I'd built, programs I'd written. Among them was a device I called the Scrambler. It was an ugly, homemade thing, a mess of wires and capacitors soldered into a Pelican case. I'd designed it years ago as a last resort tool for wiping catastrophically infected hardware with a targeted, high-intensity electromagnetic pulse. A localized EMP, powerful enough to fry any unshielded electronics within a 50-foot radius, but contained enough not to take out the power grid. I had never used it. It was dangerously powerful and probably illegal. I had a new plan, a terrible, desperate plan. The entity wanted me to come to a new location, a central point. It had to be, a place where its connection to the surface was strongest. Probably the location of the original, primary listening post for Project Echo. It wanted me to bring the key to open the door. I was going to bring the key, I was going to stick it in the lock, and then I was going to use my scrambler to weld the door shut forever. I would use the master key to open a simultaneous, high-bandwidth data channel to the entity from every tower in the network. I would offer it exactly what it wanted, a massive pipeline to the world. And while it was eagerly drinking from that fire hose of data, I would use the same channel to send a feedback loop, a cascade of pure, weaponized static, a signal of infinite chaos designed to overload its consciousness, to deafen it, to sever its connection to the technology it had learned to command. And at the focal point, at the place it had told me to go, I would trigger the EMP. I would physically destroy the conduit. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if you could give a god a seizure. but it was the only plan I had. When Sarah came out with the bags, I stopped her. "Change of plans," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "We're not running. We're going to fix this. All of us." "Rob, no. This is insane. We need to go." "Going is what it wants, Sarah. It can follow us anywhere there's a signal. It can turn our car's GPS against us. It can watch us through gas station security cameras. There is nowhere to go. The only way out is through." I explained the plan to her. The whole thing. Project Echo, the trapped mines, the threat to Lily. I showed her the schematics for my device, the code I was writing on the fly to create the feedback loop. She wasn't a technician, but she was smart, and she saw the brutal logic of it. "You think it will kill it?" she asked, her face pale. "I don't think it can be killed," I said honestly. "But I can make it deaf. I can put it back to sleep. I can cut the strings." Lily was asleep in her car seat in the back of the truck. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, my work laptop open on her lap. She was my second set of eyes, my mission control. The scrambler sat on the floor between us, connected by a long cable to a secondary battery in the truck bed. The coordinates led us up a long decommissioned service road into the Helena National Forest. The road was barely passable, choked with weeds and fallen rocks. The truck bucked and scraped its way up the mountain. My phone had lost signal miles ago. We were in a total communication dead zone, which was exactly what I wanted. "It's going to know we're coming," Sarah said, her voice tense. "It knows," I confirmed. "It's waiting." The road ended at a chain-link fence, sagging and rusted, with a faded red sign that read, U.S. Government property, no trespassing. Beyond the fence was a large concrete slab, cracked and overgrown with moss. In the center of the slab was a heavy steel hatch, like the entrance to a missile silo. This was it, the heart of the machine. I parked the truck 100 yards from the fence, close enough for the scrambler's pulse to reach the hatch, but hopefully far enough to shield us from the worst of it. The air here was heavy, still. The forest was unnervingly quiet. No birds, no insects. Just a low, almost subsonic hum that you felt more in your bones than heard with your ears. "Okay," I said, turning to Sarah. "It's time. I'm going to initiate the link. It's going to fight back. It will try to talk to us, to distract us. It might use voices it knows. My voice, your voice, Lily's." Her face was set, determined. "I know. Tell me what to do. Monitor the data flow. The moment all channels are open and stable, you tell me. Don't listen to anything else. Just watch the screen." She nodded, her knuckles white on the edge of the laptop. I took a deep breath and activated the master key software. I wrote a new command, a simple, elegant string of code that would instruct every tower in the network to open a raw, unfiltered data stream and direct it to the source coordinates of this very location. I was opening the floodgates. I hit enter. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the humming from the ground intensified, rising in pitch. The laptop screen flickered. A voice came from the truck's speakers, which should have been off. It was a perfect imitation of Lily. "Daddy, I'm scared. Make it stop." Sarah flinched, but her eyes stayed glued to the screen. "Channels are opening," she said, her voice tight. 7 and 12 are synced. 19 is resisting." The voice from the speakers changed. It was my mother, who had been dead for 10 years. "Robbie, is that you? I'm so lost." "Ignore it," I ground out, my hands gripping the steering wheel. "It's just data. It's just echoes." 19 is synced, Sarah said. 4 more to go. It's pushing back, trying to shut down the system. The interior lights of the truck started to flicker. The dashboard lit up with every warning light imaginable. The hum from the ground was a physical pressure now, making my teeth ache. The voice of Dr. Eris Thorne, thin and reedy, crackled from the speakers. "You can't do this. You'll deafen us. We'll be trapped in the dark forever." Was it the entity mimicking him, or was it really him? One of the original souls, terrified of being cut off. I couldn't know. I had to assume it was all a lie. 2 more channels, Sarah said, her voice strained. "It's trying to get into this laptop. The firewall is holding, but barely." The voice of Sarah came from the speakers, dripping with contempt. You promised you'd protect us, Rob. Look what you've done. You've led it right to us. The real Sarah didn't even look up from the screen. All channels are open, she announced, her voice ringing with finality. Data flow is stable. It's taking the bait. It's drinking. Now, I yelled. I launched the second program, the feedback loop, the weaponized static. On the laptop screen, the neat columns of data flowing to the entity dissolved into a chaotic waterfall of digital garbage. The hum from the ground changed instantly from a steady tone to a discordant, shrieking roar. It was the sound of a billion voices screaming at once. The truck shook violently. The trees around us swayed as if in a hurricane. The entity was in agony. It was being force-fed pure chaos. I grabbed the trigger for the scrambler. It was a simple red button in a small, handheld case. "Sarah, get down," I shouted, pushing her head below the dashboard. I unbuckled my seatbelt and leaned as far away from the device as I could, shielding my head with my arms. Then the voice came. It wasn't from the speakers this time. It was in my head. It was not a voice of mimicry. It was vast, ancient, and utterly alien. It was a voice of pure intellect, cold and immense as a galaxy. "You are a part of me now," it said, not with words, but with pure comprehension, downloaded directly into my brain. "This changes nothing." I slammed my thumb down on the button. There was no sound. Just a flash of brilliant blue-white light from the Pelican case on the floor, so intense it burned through my closed eyelids. A wave of force, silent and powerful, washed over the truck. Every light on the dashboard died. The laptop screen went black. The shrieking from the ground stopped, cut off in an instant. Then, there was only silence. A profound, deep silence that was more absolute than any quiet I had ever known. The unnatural stillness of the forest was gone, replaced by the normal, gentle sounds of the wilderness. A bird chirped somewhere nearby. The wind rustled the leaves. It was over. I sat up, my ears ringing. Sarah slowly raised her head. "Did it work?" she whispered. I didn't know. The truck was dead. All our electronics were fried. We were stranded on a remote mountain with a sleeping child in the back seat. But we were alive, and it was quiet. The aftermath was complicated. We walked for 6 hours before we reached a road where we could flag someone down. The company, of course, fired me. The official reason was willful destruction of company property and gross negligence, resulting in a multi-state network failure. Dave wouldn't even take my call. The men from the federal building in Helena never showed up. No black cars, no stern-faced agents on my doorstep. It was as if they wanted to pretend I never existed. My act of cosmic sabotage was written off as the meltdown of an unstable employee. We sold the house. We sold everything that wouldn't fit in a U-Haul trailer. We left Montana and never looked back. We live in a small town in the Midwest now, a place as flat and geologically boring as I could find. Our house has no smart devices, no wireless internet. Lily's tablet was never replaced. I make a living as a mechanic, working on old cars with carburetors and distributor caps. I like the solid physical feel of it. A problem has a cause has a solution. I know I didn't kill it. The voice in my head at the end told me that. You can't kill something that is part of the rock you're standing on. But I believe I severed its connection to the world above. I destroyed its nervous system, burned out its senses. I took its voice and its ears. I put it back into its deep, silent prison. The screaming of the trapped souls is gone, but so is their hope of rescue. I don't know if that's a mercy or a damnation. It's a question I live with every day. Most nights I sleep soundly, but sometimes on the quietest nights, when the wind is just right, I think I can feel it. A low, faint vibration through the soles of my feet. A tremor that doesn't register on any seismograph. It's the slow, patient rhythm of a mind that measures time and epochs. It's sleeping now, deaf and blind. But I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that it's learning, it's healing, and it is listening for a new voice.